for you. And Schmoopy. It's from Schmoopy to no soup for you in this episode. As in fact, this is a classic. It is a very well-known episode, and on IMDb has a rating of 9.5 out of 10. Probably one of the highest rated episodes, I would say, in the entire series. And definitely well-deserved. Some people think it's not as good as it looks. It's still a classic. You think Seinfeld, you think the Soup Nazi. Where did this Soup Nazi idea come from, though? So, Spike Feresten. It's his first, that's how you pronounce his name, right? Feresten. It was his first episode that he wrote. So obviously he's trying to make an impression with Jerry and Larry. Not really getting much. And when he felt a little more comfortable, he's talking to them. He tells some story about this guy who sells soup at a soup kitchen. Just right down the street from David Letterman. And the soup's really good. But the guy is basically very picky about how his customers place their orders. And people call him the Soup Nazi. And Jerry and Larry started laughing. He was just telling a story. And then they go, no, that's a show. That's going to be your first show. A parody of this guy, his name's Al. And most of the cast members had eaten there before. Jason Alexander had. Wayne Knight lived close by to him. So, yeah. He was pretty well known, of course, in the New York area. And they're about to make an episode of a parody of this guy, Al. So, of course, that's the main story. The big hit this episode, we have an episode where non-fat yogurt was a big hit. Now we have an episode where soup is a big hit. And not soup, the episode The Soup, whenever Kenny Bania kept saying that soup didn't count as a meal. Speaking of which, he makes a brief appearance in this episode when Jerry and George were in line to get some soup. This guy, his name is, the guy's name is actually Yev Kassem, which of course is not mentioned though until the finale, when he appears in the finale. But also what's going on is Jerry's dating this woman named Sheila, and Jerry's not really a big affectionate public, corny, goofy, flirty type of guy. And I guess they like to just hang on each other and just kiss every 2 seconds. Basically act like a high school couple, basically. They're basically, for those of you who are wrestling fans, they're basically they're basically a Sammy Guevara and Ty Conchi, basically. But they would just hang each other and just go, Schmoopy, you're Schmoopy, you're Schmoopy, you're Schmoopy. But George and Elaine just don't have the guts to tell Jerry that it's unbearable. But Jerry and George go to the soup kitchen. Elaine was going to go with them, but she ran into some guy on the street who was selling an armor that was beautiful. He was only selling it for $200, and he agrees to let Elaine buy it for $200. Well, Elaine's building, which also is a story from Spike Feresten, Elaine's building doesn't allow moving on Sundays. So they can't move the armor into the apartment. So that's to wait till the next day. And Tom, her landlord, even advised that he will help her the next day. So Kramer borrows one of Jerry's pillows and agrees to guard the armor. Because he has really nothing else to do. Jerry and George, though, of course, go, and at first they see Kenny Bania, and Jerry basically tells them, no, you're not going to be cutting in line. And of course, he tries to pretend at first he doesn't notice him, but of course, unfortunately does. Newman also gets his food as well from there, and then, of course, he has to love it as well and praise how good the soup is. So they go in, and then Jerry successfully gets his food, but then George complains about that he didn't get bread. And he kept arguing that he wasn't getting free bread. George got the no soup for you, but he basically didn't get punished for it. Elaine, meanwhile, went to go get Kramer some soup, but Kramer's trying to warn Elaine how to order, but Elaine was wouldn't listen. So Elaine comes in and she's like all like chill and obnoxious, like, banging on the tops. And then she also tells the soup Nazi that he looks a lot like this one guy in the Al Pacino character from Scent of a Woman. And she's just going, ooh-ah, ooh-ah. Which, fun fact, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and especially, it's always been Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I mispronounced it this whole time, I apologize, never had seen that movie. So Jerry gave her, advised her, to do that, ooh-ah, ooh-ah. But of course, because of her obnoxiousness, the soup Nazi goes, very good, very good. You know what else? No soup for you! Come back 1 year! So basically, she's banned from the store for a whole year. And she wasn't able to get Kramer's soup. But meanwhile, also, this is the first of, I think, 3 appearances we see of Cedric and Bob, these gay thugs, these gay tough guys, which, if interviewers wouldn't have told me they would have told me that they were gay, said that they were gay, I wouldn't have even recognized they were gay at all. But they are just, threaten Kramer, and they steal the armoire, which Elaine misses out on, unfortunately. Of course, then George is trying to confront Jerry also about Schmoopy, and there's a scene where they're talking about it in the in Jerry's apartment, and then Elaine just gets up and leaves as George is about to get her involved in the conversation. Excuse me. And they're also, before he had walked in, Jerry's having to talk how George George complained that Jerry is becoming too goofy. Elaine thinks George is becoming more normal, but Jerry also thinks that George is acting like he thinks he's better than everyone now because he's engaged. But it's all misunderstandings. And of course, then George finally admits that he thinks it's obnoxious the way they do Schmoopy. But Julia Louis-Dreyfus had suggested to Andy Ackerman, why don't we whenever George starts talking about Schmoopy, since I don't have any lines in the rest of the scene, why don't I just get up and walk out? So that way it looks like that, I don't want to get involved, which, end up working out pretty darn good. I'm trying to find something here. Oh, I found it there. Never mind. So that was a good little acting tips. But then, of course, at first, Jerry and Sheila had broken up. But then they got back together and they had broken up again a second time. But George and Susan sees Jerry and Sheila at Monk's, but they're sitting on the same side of the booth. In which George makes a big fuss out of it. And then he starts doing the same thing that, Jerry does to Sheila, to Susan. And they both start making out in the booth. Now, you do see in the background, see the manager walking over to tell them to cut it out. Apparently, in the original script, he was supposed to tell them to cut it out and threaten to kick them out, but I guess that got cut, apparently. But eventually, Jerry and Sheila did break up, but because George showed a little more affection, Susan was really, excited about it, but George was like, that's not really what, without telling her, he was like sitting there like growing, like, it's not really who I am. I was just doing that to teach Jerry a lesson. And of course, also, I think he mentioned also the whole thing about the whole pact thing as well. Now, meanwhile, Kramer had gotten a new armoire to make up for Elaine from the soup Nazi. However, the soup Nazi didn't know that Kramer gotten it for Elaine. But Elaine thinks that the soup Nazi knew it was hers, so she went to thank the soup Nazi, and the soup Nazi flipped out and said, if I knew it was you, I wouldn't have given it to you. So because of how arrogant she thought he was, she actually, unintentionally, found copies of his recipes that were hidden inside of the armoire. And basically, she told him she was going to publish his recipes, which, of course, drove him out of business. He had to close the soup kitchen and move to Argentina. And at the end of the episode, Newman and Jerry run to their homes to get pots to get the last of the soup Nazi soups before he closed up shop. Now, of course, the guy which of course Larry Thomas, who played the soup Nazi, which also he didn't have an actual accent. He actually just would did like a Middle Eastern accent that he did based off of Omar Sharif's accent in Lawrence of Arabia. Sorry, I'm getting a little tired. But of course, first Larry Thomas didn't know this was based off of a real guy. But also the real guy Al, he was offended by this episode. And whenever, it was like a year later in season 8 when they went to the soup kitchen to have soup, and everybody first was telling Jerry, no, don't do this. The guy, doesn't like it. He thinks we gave him a bad reputation and whatnot. He's embarrassed about it. And I guess apparently there had been some Jerry Seinfeld impersonators who had come in, but of course he realized that the real Jerry Seinfeld was here. He basically just chewed Jerry out and said no soup for you, basically. Yeah, and I think the guy also called Jerry an idiot clown or something like that because he thought that he hurt his reputation because of him basing it off of him and such. But it's still a very well known episode. Solely for the soup Nazi in general. Schmoopy, played a little bit of an effect, but definitely the soup Nazi idea in general is just definitely one of the more popular things about the episode. Of course, it makes me think of when people called my mom the breadstick Nazi whenever I was in elementary school or middle school or whatnot, because I went to private schools growing up, so I went to the same school from preschool to 8th grade. But on breadstick day, they would have you could pay a little extra and get some extra breadsticks. Well, some kids would try to get away with saying that they did pay extra, but they really didn't. And my mom would say something like, "No breadstick for you," but she didn't mean to sound like that. But I think one of the janitors started calling her the breadstick Nazi or something like that. But yeah, again, this was the first episode, of course, also for Spike Feresten, who had a couple other good ideas. Like when we get to season 9, he actually had a real life experience based off of The Voice. And also, there was a scene wherever Jerry and Kramer tried to confront the gay thugs, but they ran away because of how tough they were. But that actually was based off of another incident where Spike Feresten tried to confront a couple tough thugs in Boston, but it did not work out for him, and he ran off from them. Like I said, that's the first of, I think, 3 appearances that we see Cedric and Bob, the gay thugs, which is this one. We see the one in the episode where Kramer does the AIDS walk, and then in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. So yeah, they appear a couple of times. And of course, hats off to Larry Thomas as well for pulling off, a great soup Nazi too. So yeah, definitely, this is one episode I think should be at least in your top 5, I would say, for one of the best episodes of all time for sure. The story is just funny, and the parody and everything, it just worked out so good. But yeah, that is my thoughts on the Soup Nazi episode. What are your guys' thoughts on the Soup Nazi? Make sure your thoughts down in the comments section below, and be sure as always to slap a like on the video. Well, below. Be sure to slap a like on the video, subscribe for more content on my channel, follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And next time I see you guys, we'll be on to disc 2 of season 7. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you later. Have a good night. And remember, if you, actually, I should say this. If you don't have anything nice to say on my channel, I know I have the list of Jericho, but since it's the moment, if you don't have anything nice to say, then I'm going to block you and say, no comments for you! That timed out badly. I was trying to hit the change the ending scene, and then of course it glitched on me. So let's try this one more time. If you have anything nice to say, you want to say mean things to me, no comments for you.